We're here at the site of the Anderson Blockhouse. This was mile marker 0 for the Wilderness Road. Settlers would come from all over the eastern seaboard and would gather right here. And as they waited for their numbers to grow so it would be safer to go across, they would start the Wilderness Road journey to the Cumberland Gap and then on through to Kentucky, where they would try to find new lands to settle on. We're here at the Natural Tunnel Park, excuse me, and this is a recreation of the John Anderson Blockhouse that we saw on our first stop. They didn't have an actual blockhouse here, but you can come and see the one that looked like the one that was at the John Anderson place, where the settlers would gather before they would head off on their trip. So you can see this beautiful area here. You can reach it very easily. Just come right up to the Natural Tunnel Park and then just keep going and you'll come right to this little area here. It's very beautiful.
Located in Duffield, Virginia.
Yes. We're at the Daniel Boone Wilderness Road Interpretive Center, and behind me you can see this range of mountains. There's a little notch that's called Cumberland Gap. This is where the settlers, as they were coming from where we've been before, they would come through this place in Duffield, and they would go right over top of that mountain right there at that gap and drop over into the valley next door. Now there's no road that goes through this, so we're going to have to go around it to pick up the trail again. But as you can see, this is a beautiful area and it's a great interpretive center here. If you get a chance, go check it out. It's got a great movie and all kinds of different displays. I'll take a look at that. We're looking out at the valley where the settlers would have come across Cumberland Gap and come through. This would have been the road that they would have kept marching toward to get on through, and we're going to head to Jonesboro and on into Cumberland Gap. But this is how they would have gone. Look at this beautiful valley here. It would have been more covered with trees by that time though, and at all times they were under threat of being attacked by roving warrior bands coming across to protect their own Indian lands. We're in Stickleyville, which back then was just a little, well, still is a place on the road, but this is where James Boone, the son of Daniel Boone, and 5 of his friends were attacked while they were camping out in this area. Not far from here, the Indians came in quickly, just at dawn, and they killed 2 of his friends outright with gunshots. James Boone and one of his friends were wounded very seriously and couldn't leave. The 5th friend was able to crawl into the woods and listen all during the day as James Boone and his friend were tortured, begging to be put to death, until finally at the end of the day one of the Indians did hatchet chop James and his friend. So Daniel Boone was completely devastated with the news that he found out that his oldest son had died here. He came back and was able to find the bodies and bury them. So from here on out we're going to head across the mountain.
So basically this spot right in here.
Yeah, it's ahead of this creek. Apparently there was a creek somewhere in it. We're here in Jonesboro, Virginia. Behind me is the Lee County Courthouse, and this is where the site of the Mumps Fort was. It was one of the forts along the way of the Great Road, and it would protect settlers coming across this way. But in 1776, they had to abandon the fort when the Cherokee War started. The British were getting the Indians to rise up against the colonials to try to put more pressure on them so they would come back to Britain and obey and pay their taxes. So this fort was abandoned, and we're going to see it was very difficult for settlers coming through here because at this point we're deep in Indian territory. We're here in the middle of a Cherokee village. It's right outside of Martin Station. This is an example of one of the huts they would have had, and you can see that it's made of these little grass, thick grass stalks and some wattle adobe, which is basically mud, over top of some kind of a wood frame. But it kind of goes in a circular motion. We'll just go in through there and just kind of wind like a little conch shell. You can see different parts of the village here. Very interesting place, and it's just now beginning to rain, so We're going to try to get some film in of the fort, and then we'll head on to Cumberland Gap. These little carved out niches where the smoke would go through.
This is the inside of the hut. So imagine living inside the hut. This would be maybe your sitting area or sleeping area. And in the middle, you would have your fire. Now, they wouldn't have built a chair like that, I don't think. I think that's more like a European design there. Here's a basket.
Mac and I have just made it to Martin Station. We're about 10 miles from Cumberland Gap. So far, we've had good weather. It's now starting to blow. All right, we're standing here in the rain at Martin Station. This was the last way station before they would get to Cumberland Gap. We're only about 7 to 10 miles away from Cumberland Gap. Here's where the settlers would come, and they could rest, they could get some supplies, and just a chance to kind of catch their breath before they made the final push over into Kentucky. Now, the problem was this was hotly contested ground. The Cherokee thought this was their land. The Shawnee to our north thought it was their land, and of course the settlers thought it was their land. So there was quite a bit of fighting. This fort itself changed hands 2 or 3 times, where they had to abandon it because of Indian attacks and come back. But it finally stayed in Joseph Martin's hands and was able to open up the trail. We're here at the Wilderness Road Cumberland Gap Interpretive Center. It's here in actually Harrogate, Kentucky, and we just went through a really cool tunnel. If you talk to your family and they come in here, they're really going to enjoy it. But the museum is free. They've got a movie here. But this explains the importance of the Cumberland Gap and how westward expansion happened because of this gap in these mountains. Mr. McElrath and myself are going to take the trail and walk right into the Cumberland Gap, and we'll take some pictures from there. Okay, we're here near the Cumberland Gap. This trail behind me is going to lead us right into the gap where Daniel Boone would have crossed with these settlers and thousands more. So it's about a 6/10 of a mile walk, so here we go.
Lay down, boys, take a little nap. Lay down, boys, take a little nap. Lay down, boys, take a little nap. 41 miles to Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Gap. Ooh, way low down in Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap is a mighty fine place. Cumberland Gap is a mighty fine place. Cumberland Gap is a mighty fine place. 3 kinds of water to wash your face. Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Gap. Ooh, way low down in Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap with its cliffs and rocks. Cumberland Gap with its cliffs and rocks. Cumberland Gap with its cliffs and rocks. Home of the panther, bear, and fox. Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Gap. Ooh, way low down in Cumberland Gap. Me and my wife and my wife's grandpap. Me and my wife and my wife's grandpap. Me and my wife and my wife's grandpap. We raised Cain at Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Gap.
We're standing right on the very ground that is Cumberland Gap. This is the point where Boone and many others before him, but Boone made it famous because he actually cleared a trail for others to follow, where they would come through. And hundreds of years before that, this is where warpaths where the Indians would come through, either Shawnee or Cherokee raiders, to attack each other over this contested land. This was also, but even before that, where the buffalo would come through on their trail to the east. And in fact, this was the major highway between east and west. So what we're looking at now is the famous spot. The sign below also mentions that this was also a very hotly contested part of the Civil War, where the Union was trying to separate the South from the East and the West. Had a garrison here, but they were overwhelmed and starving to death as the Confederates sieged this place and finally had to move out. So if you can, it's about a 6/10 of a mile walk from the parking lot. Even a fat guy like me who's out of shape, sweating and hot, made it. Definitely get your family and come out here.
Lay down, boys, take a little nap. Lay down, boys, take a little nap. Lay down, boys, take a little nap. 41 miles to Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Gap. Ooh, way low down in Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap is a mighty fine place. Cumberland Gap is a mighty fine place. Cumberland Gap is a mighty fine place. 3 kinds of water to wash your face. Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Gap. Ooh, way low down in Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap with its cliffs and rocks. Cumberland Gap with its cliffs and rocks. Cumberland Gap with its cliffs and rocks. Home of the panther, bear, and fox. Cumberland Gap.